They told her it would be just 10 days. 10 days for tempers to cool, for her husband to move out, for a judge to sort through the wreckage of their marriage. Deborah Tinsley made one choice that morning in Clinton, Maryland, a choice that seemed reasonable, protective, necessary. She asked the sheriff to wait just a few hours before serving the order. Her husband deserved to pick up their son from daycare one last time as a free man. It was his turn, after all. She was trying to be fair. By sunset, her 4-year-old boy was gone. By midnight, her husband had written a letter describing funeral arrangements for himself and their child. That was May 6, 1996. For the next 28 years, Deborah would search for her son in the faces of strangers, wondering if kindness had been her greatest mistake, or if the system had failed them all long before that Tuesday afternoon. If you believe some mysteries don't end when the case goes cold, subscribe to Greg's Cold Files. And let us know in the comments, where are you watching from today? Part 1. The Marriage That Wasn't. Deborah Tinsley married Reuben Blackwell in 1992. He was 35, worked in HVAC installation, and had the kind of confidence that made you believe his promises. Their son, Reuben Jr., was born on Valentine's Day, 1993. For the first year, Reuben Sr. was a devoted father, gentle, attentive, present. But by 1995, the marriage was fracturing. Money problems led to arguments. Arguments led to sulking. Sulking turned into rage. He threw things, a remote that cracked the drywall, a coffee mug that shattered near Deborah's head. RJ was learning what anger looked like, and Deborah knew she had to protect him. In late April 1996, Deborah's co-worker suggested an ex parte order, a temporary protective measure requiring Reuben Sr. to leave their home for 10 days. No criminal charges, just space to figure things out. Deborah made the call on the morning of May 6th. The day, everything changed. The woman who answered at the sheriff's office was patient and kind. She walked Deborah through the process, explained that she'd need to go to the courthouse in Upper Marlboro to file the petition, and that a deputy would serve the order once it was signed by a judge. The whole thing could be done in a few hours. Deborah took a half-day off work. She dropped RJ at Little Explorer's daycare on Piscataway Road at 8:15 that morning. He was wearing his favorite shirt, the one with the blue dinosaur on it, and he clutched his stuffed dog, Copper. She kissed him on the forehead and told him Daddy would pick him up today. He smiled at that. He loved when Daddy picked him up because Reuben Sr. would sometimes stop for French fries on the way home. By noon, Deborah had the ex parte order in her hand. The judge had granted it without hesitation after hearing about the thrown mug, the escalating anger, the destroyed kitchen. The order required Reuben Sr. to vacate the residence immediately and stay at least 500 feet away from Deborah and RJ for 10 days. After that, they'd have a hearing to determine next steps. She called the sheriff's office from the courthouse parking lot and gave them her address. They said a deputy would be there within the hour. But then Deborah hesitated. Reuben Sr. was supposed to pick up RJ from daycare at 5:30. It was his turn. They'd been alternating for months. If the deputy showed up at the house before then, Reuben Sr. might not be there. He'd been leaving for hours at a time lately, not telling her where he was going. She wanted the order served today, not tomorrow. She wanted this done. So she made a decision that would haunt her for the next 28 years. She called the sheriff's office back and asked if the deputy could wait until after 5:30 to serve the order. That way, Reuben Sr. would definitely be home. He'd be back with RJ. The dispatcher said that wouldn't be a problem. They'd send someone around 6. Deborah went back to work for the afternoon. She tried to focus on the stack of insurance claims on her desk, but her mind kept drifting. She imagined Reuben Sr.'s face when he read the order. Would he be angry, hurt, relieved, maybe? She didn't know anymore. She didn't know him anymore. At 5:40, her phone rang. It was Mrs. Patterson from the daycare. "Hi, Deborah. Just wanted to let you know RJ's dad picked him up right on time. They left about 10 minutes ago." "Okay, thank you," Deborah said, and hung up. She felt a small sense of relief. At least that part had gone smoothly. At least RJ wouldn't be confused or upset. His father would bring him home, the deputy would serve the papers, and Reuben Sr. would leave quietly. 10 days. Just 10 days to cool off and figure things out. She finished up her work and left the clinic at 6:15. The drive home took 20 minutes. When she pulled into the driveway of their rental house on Dangerfield Road, she noticed Reuben Sr.'s blue 1993 Volvo wasn't there. That was odd. He should have been home by now. She unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The house was quiet. Too quiet. "Reuben?" she called. No answer. "RJ?" Nothing. She walked through the living room, the kitchen, checked the bedrooms. Empty. She went back outside and checked the small backyard. No one. Deborah's chest began to tighten. She went back inside and called Reuben Sr.'s pager. She waited 5 minutes. No response. She called her mother's house, thinking maybe he'd taken RJ there for dinner. Her mother answered on the second ring. "Mom, are Reuben and RJ there?" "No, honey. Why? What's wrong?" Deborah's stomach dropped. "They're not home. He picked RJ up from daycare almost an hour ago, but they're not here. Maybe they stopped somewhere. You know how he is. He probably took RJ for ice cream or something." "Maybe," Deborah said, but her voice didn't sound convincing even to herself. She hung up and called the daycare. Mrs. Patterson confirmed again that Reuben Sr. had picked up RJ at 5:30. Everything seemed normal. RJ was happy, excited to see his dad. At 7, Deborah called the sheriff's office. Her hands were shaking as she dialed. She asked if they'd served the ex parte order yet. The dispatcher put her on hold, then came back and said yes. Deputy Morris had attempted to serve it at approximately 5:50 at Deborah's mother's address on Tulane Drive. "Wait, what? My mother's house? Why there?" "That's the address Mr. Blackwell gave when the deputy encountered him there with the child," the dispatcher said. "He refused to accept service and fled the scene with the boy before the deputy could detain him." Deborah's stomach dropped. "What do you mean he fled?" According to the report, Deputy Morris arrived at the Tulane Drive address and found Mr. Blackwell in the driveway with a young child. When the deputy attempted to serve the order, Mr. Blackwell became agitated, placed the child in his vehicle, and drove away at high speed. The deputy did not pursue due to safety concerns for the child. Deborah couldn't breathe. She tried to form words, but nothing came out. The room was spinning. "Ma'am, are you still there?" "He has my son," she finally said. "He has RJ." The dispatcher's tone shifted immediately. "Ma'am, I'm going to transfer you to a detective. Stay on the line." The unraveling detective Raymond Kelsey of the Prince George's County Police Department arrived at Deborah's house at 8:30 that night. He was in his mid-40s, with graying hair and a tired expression that suggested he'd seen this kind of situation before. He sat with Deborah at her kitchen table. Her neighbor, Mrs. Chen, had come over to sit with her and asked her to walk him through everything: the marriage, the arguments, the ex parte order, the timeline of the day. She told him about the mug Reuben Sr. had thrown, the destroyed kitchen, the weeks of escalating anger. She told him about the call to the sheriff's office, the decision to wait until after daycare pickup to serve the order. She told him about her mother's house, about how Reuben Sr. sometimes took RJ there to visit. Detective Kelsey listened without interrupting. When she finished, he set down his pen and looked at her directly. "Mrs. Blackwell, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." Has your husband ever threatened to harm himself or your son? Deborah's throat tightened. He's said things when he gets upset, like, I can't do this anymore, or maybe everyone would be better off without me. But I don't think he meant, has he ever been specific? She hesitated, the memory flooding back. A few weeks ago, after I mentioned maybe separating, he said if I ever tried to leave him, he'd make sure I never saw RJ again. I thought he meant custody, like legally. I didn't think he'd actually. Detective Kelsey nodded slowly, writing something in his notepad. Okay, we're going to treat this as a custodial interference case for now, but we're also going to issue a BOLO, that's a be on the lookout, for the vehicle and get his information out to surrounding jurisdictions. Do you have a recent photo of your son? Deborah went to the living room and pulled a framed photo off the shelf. It was from RJ's 3rd birthday party last year. He was smiling, holding a piece of cake, his stuffed dog Copper visible in the corner of the frame. She handed it to Detective Kelsey, and he studied it for a moment before placing it carefully in his folder. We'll find them, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Deborah heard it, the uncertainty, the unspoken knowledge that these cases didn't always end well. Over the next 48 hours, the investigation moved quickly, but yielded troubling discoveries. Police learned that Reuben Sr. had withdrawn $3,000 from their joint bank account on May 5th, the day before the abduction. Deborah hadn't known about the withdrawal. When Detective Kelsey showed her the bank records, her hands trembled. $3,000. That wasn't a spontaneous decision. That was planning. That was premeditation. They also discovered that Reuben Sr. had called his mother, Dorothy Blackwell, multiple times in the days leading up to May 6th. Dorothy lived in Cleveland, Ohio, about 370 miles northwest. When detectives contacted her by phone on May 7th, she was evasive. Her answers were careful, measured. She claimed she hadn't heard from her son in weeks, that she had no idea where he might have gone. But her voice wavered when they asked about RJ, and Detective Kelsey noted in his report that he believed Dorothy knew more than she was saying. On May 9th, 3 days after the abduction, a letter arrived at Dorothy's home in Cleveland. It was postmarked from somewhere in West Virginia, but there was no return address. The envelope was addressed in Reuben Sr.'s distinctive handwriting, large, slightly slanted letters that Dorothy had recognized since he was a child. She stared at the envelope for nearly an hour before opening it, her hands shaking, knowing somehow that whatever was inside would change everything. Inside was a single handwritten page. Dorothy read it once, then again, then a third time, tears streaming down her face. Then she picked up the phone and called the Cleveland Police Department. They patched her through to Detective Kelsey in Maryland. Detective Kelsey read the letter aloud to Deborah over the phone. His voice was careful, measured. Mom, I'm sorry for everything. I know you tried to help me, but I can't be fixed. Deborah's trying to take RJ away from me, and I can't let that happen. He's all I have. If I can't be his father, then there's no point in any of this. I've thought about it a lot, and I think it's better if we both just go to sleep and don't wake up. I want to be cremated. RJ, too. Scatter us somewhere near water. He likes water. Don't let Deborah have his ashes. She doesn't deserve them after what she's done. I love you. Tell everyone I'm sorry. Deborah dropped the phone. She could hear Detective Kelsey's voice calling her name, tinny and distant through the receiver on the floor. Mrs. Chen picked it up and spoke quietly to the detective. When she hung up, she put her arms around Deborah and held her while she sobbed. The FBI became involved on May 10th. Because there was evidence suggesting Reuben Sr. had crossed state lines, the West Virginia postmark, the possible connection to his mother in Ohio, the case fell under federal jurisdiction. Special Agent Lorraine Hughes was assigned as the lead investigator. She was in her late 30s, tall, sharp-eyed, and spoke with the kind of authority that made you believe she could find anyone, anywhere. Agent Hughes met with Deborah on May 11th at the Prince George's County Police Station. She'd brought copies of the letter, photographs of Reuben Sr. and R.J., and a map of the Mid-Atlantic region marked with possible routes. "Mrs. Blackwell, I want you to know that we're treating this with the utmost priority," Agent Hughes said, her voice firm but not unkind. "Your husband crossed state lines with your son, which makes this a federal case. We have resources. We will find them." But weeks passed, and there was nothing. No sightings of the blue Volvo, no activity on Reuben Sr.'s credit cards after the May 5th withdrawal, no calls to family or friends. It was as if he and R.J. had vanished into thin air. Agent Hughes coordinated with state police across Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. She distributed flyers with R.J.'s photo. She worked with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children to get the case national attention. In July 1996, 2 months after the abduction, a pair of hikers found a blue Volvo abandoned in a wooded area near Parkersburg, West Virginia. The license plates matched Reuben Sr.'s vehicle. The hikers called it in, and within hours, FBI agents and local police descended on the location. The car was parked on an old logging road, barely visible from the main highway. The doors were unlocked. Inside, the vehicle was unnaturally clean, as if someone had wiped down every surface. No fingerprints on the steering wheel, the door handles, the dashboard, no personal belongings, no toys, no child's seat, no evidence that R.J. had ever been there. The trunk was empty, except for the spare tire. Forensic technicians spent 2 days processing the vehicle. They found nothing. No blood, no hair, no fibers that didn't belong to the car itself. It was as if Reuben Sr. had deliberately erased any trace of where they'd been or where they were going. Police theorized that he'd switched vehicles, possibly buying a used car with cash from someone who didn't ask questions. The area around Parkersburg had several small used car lots that operated on a cash-only basis, the kind of places where paperwork was optional and record-keeping was minimal. But none of the dealers remembered anyone matching Reuben Sr.'s description, and without a specific vehicle to search for, the trail went cold. A felony warrant was issued for Reuben Sr.'s arrest on charges of kidnapping and custodial interference. The case was featured on local news stations throughout Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia, and Ohio. Deborah appeared on camera for the first time on July 15, 1996. She sat in a chair in the studio of a Baltimore news station, holding the birthday photo of R.J., and looked directly into the camera. "If anyone has seen my son, Reuben Blackwell Jr., please call the FBI. He's 4 years old. He has dark hair and brown eyes. He loves dinosaurs and his stuffed dog named Copper. His father took him from me on May 6th, and I just want him to know that I love him. I'm looking for him. I'll never stop looking." Her voice broke on the last sentence, but she didn't look away from the camera. The segment aired during the evening news. The station received 12 calls that night. None of them led anywhere. Most were well-meaning but mistaken, people who'd seen a child who looked similar or who remembered reading about the case but had no new information. 2 calls were from people claiming to have psychic visions of where R.J. was. Agent Hughes followed up on every single lead, no matter how unlikely. Nothing panned out. No one called. By September, the media attention faded. By December, the case was cold. But cold cases don't mean forgotten, not for the people who live them. While the rest of the world moved on, Deborah remained frozen in May 1996, reliving that phone call, that empty house, that moment when she realized her son was gone. The years that followed weren't measured in calendars, but in absences, birthdays without a child, Christmases without laughter, a lifetime of waiting. The years between Deborah never stopped searching. Every year on RJ's birthday, she'd buy a cupcake with a candle and sing to an empty room. She joined support groups for parents of abducted children. In 1998, the FBI issued a federal warrant for unlawful flight to avoid prosecution. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children created age progression images, RJ at 9, at 12, at 16, at 21. Deborah stared at each one, trying to find her baby in the face of a stranger. She never remarried. In 2015, a man claimed he'd seen someone matching Reuben Sr.'s description in Akron, Ohio. The lead went nowhere. Every May 6th, Deborah gave interviews to local news. She'd say the same thing. "If you're out there, RJ, I never stopped looking. I never stopped loving you. Come home." And she was right. 300 miles northwest, in a city she'd never visited, her son was growing up under a different name, building a life constructed on lies he didn't yet know were lies. The man who became Marcus. In Toledo, Ohio, a boy named Marcus Webb started kindergarten in the fall of 2000. He was 7 years old, according to his birth certificate, though his actual age was 7.5. He was small for his age, quiet in class, and noticeably nervous around adult men, something his teacher, Mrs. Alvarez, noted in her observations during the first week of school. Mrs. Alvarez mentioned it to the school counselor, who spoke with Marcus's father during a routine parent meeting. Robert Webb was a tall, imposing man with graying hair and a deep voice, but he was soft-spoken when he explained that Marcus had experienced some trauma when he was younger. He didn't elaborate, and the counselor didn't press. They'd moved to Toledo for a fresh start, Robert said. A new beginning. The counselor accepted this explanation. The Toledo public school system had plenty of kids with complicated backgrounds. Marcus wasn't special in that regard, and beyond the initial nervousness, he seemed to be adjusting well. He was polite, did his homework, never caused trouble. Marcus did well academically. He was good at reading, even better at math. By 3rd grade, he was reading 2 years above his grade level. He kept to himself mostly, ate lunch alone, unless a teacher paired him with other students for group activities. In middle school, he joined the chess club. He was good at chess, patient, strategic, willing to think 3 moves ahead. In high school, he tried playing JV basketball for 1 season before quitting. He told his father it wasn't fun anymore, and Robert didn't push him to continue. Robert Webb, who was really Reuben Blackwell Sr., had aged considerably since 1996. His hair had gone fully gray by his 50s. He'd gained weight in his 40s, then lost it when he developed high blood pressure and his doctor put him on medication. He worked a series of low-wage jobs over the years, warehouse work at night, janitorial services at office buildings, overnight shifts at a truck stop off I-75. He always requested jobs that paid in cash when possible, always used variations of the name Robert Webb or Rob Weber or R.W. Black. He'd obtained a fake Social Security card for himself and Marcus through a contact in West Virginia shortly after fleeing Maryland, a man who specialized in creating clean identities for people who needed to disappear. It wasn't a particularly sophisticated fake, but it was good enough for employers who didn't ask too many questions or run thorough background checks. He'd enrolled Marcus in school using a forged birth certificate that listed Marcus's birth year as 1993 and his birthplace as Charleston, West Virginia. Mother, deceased. Father, Robert Webb. Marcus never questioned his father's stories about their past. Or maybe he did, quietly, in the parts of his mind he didn't share with anyone. But he loved his father. Robert Webb was all he had, and Robert Webb had been a good father in the ways that mattered to a child. He helped with homework, sitting at the kitchen table with Marcus for hours, patiently explaining fractions, and then algebra, and then geometry. He taught Marcus how to change a tire when Marcus turned 16, how to cook spaghetti and scrambled eggs, how to balance a checkbook in an era when most people were switching to online banking. He went to parent-teacher conferences, showing up tired from his night shifts, but always attentive, always asking what he could do to help Marcus succeed. He showed up. But there were gaps in Marcus's history that never quite made sense, even if he didn't consciously acknowledge them. He had no baby photos, no pictures of himself before age 7 or 8, no relatives who visited or called on holidays. When he asked about his mother, Robert would get quiet and his face would close off. "She died when you were very young. Car accident. It's too painful to talk about." His voice would break just enough to make Marcus feel guilty for asking. So Marcus learned not to ask. He learned not to wonder why they moved every few years. Toledo to Akron, back to Toledo, then to a different apartment on the other side of the city. He learned not to question why his father never had friends over, why they never went to church or community events, why Robert always paid for everything in cash and avoided filling out forms whenever possible. These things just were. They were the texture of Marcus's life, unremarkable because he had nothing to compare them to. The search for answers. Angela's pregnancy changed something. She asked about family medical history. Marcus realized he didn't know. When he asked his father, Robert became defensive. "Why does it matter? You're healthy. The baby will be fine." But it wasn't all Marcus needed to know. Why didn't he have extended family? Why had they moved so often? Why no friends from before Toledo? In June 2022, Angela suggested they do an ancestry DNA test. Marcus agreed, though he didn't tell his father. They spit into tubes and mailed them off to 23andMe. In late July, Marcus got an email. His results were ready. Under DNA relatives, there was a match listed as predicted relationship, parent. The name was Deborah Tinsley. Location, Maryland. His father had told him his mother was dead. Marcus clicked on her profile. A black woman in her 50s, smiling. He Googled Deborah Tinsley, Maryland, and found a Facebook page called Find Reuben Blackwell Jr. The profile photo was a missing child poster. Marcus clicked through posts, dozens of them, birthday tributes, anniversary posts, news articles about parental abduction. One from February 14th, 2022. "Happy 29th birthday, RJ. Wherever you are, I hope you know your mama never stopped loving you." Marcus's hands shook. He clicked on a news article from 2016. 20 years later, mother still searching for abducted son. It described how Reuben Blackwell Jr., age 4, had been taken by his father on May 6, 1996. The article included a photo of the father, tall, black, graying hair. Marcus looked at the photo. Then he went to the bathroom and looked in the mirror. He saw his father's face in his own. He found an age progression image. It showed what Reuben Blackwell Jr. might look like at 29. The face could have been his own. The truth, hidden in a closet. Marcus didn't confront his father immediately. He spent weeks wrestling with what he'd discovered. Part of him wanted to believe there was some explanation. In early August, while his father was at a doctor's appointment, Marcus searched the house. In the bedroom closet, beneath tax records, he found a manila envelope. Inside, a birth certificate for Reuben Blackwell Jr., born February 14, 1993. Parents, Reuben Blackwell Sr. and Deborah Tinsley Blackwell. A Social Security card. Photos, a baby, a toddler, a small boy holding a stuffed dog. Newspaper clippings about the abduction. Letters from Dorothy Blackwell begging Reuben Sr. to bring the boy home. and a child's drawing in crayon, two stick figures holding hands under a sun. In wobbly letters, me and Dady. In adult handwriting, RJ, age 4, April 1996. 1 month before the abduction. Marcus sat on the floor with papers spread around him, watching his life collapse. When Robert came home, Marcus was at the kitchen table with the envelope. Robert stopped in the doorway, face pale. "Marcus, my name isn't Marcus. I can explain. You kidnapped me. It wasn't like that. Your mother was trying to take you away from me. I panicked. So you stole me. I saved you. She was going to poison you against me. You wrote a letter saying you were going to kill us both." Robert flinched. "I wasn't in a good place, but I never would have hurt you." Marcus stood. "I don't know anything anymore." He left and drove to Angela's parents' house. The choice. For 3 weeks, Marcus lived with Angela's parents. His father called daily. Marcus didn't answer, but he couldn't stop thinking, "She was trying to take you away from me." Was that true? The worst part was that Marcus couldn't simply hate his father. He loved the man who'd raised him, taught him to ride a bike, helped with homework, showed up to every conference. But that same man had stolen him from a mother who'd spent 26 years grieving. Some nights, Marcus catalogued memories, searching for evidence of the monster. But all he found were moments of gentleness. His father staying up all night when Marcus had pneumonia, working double shifts for college textbooks, crying at Marcus's graduation. And yet his father had written a letter about funeral arrangements, had threatened murder-suicide, had ripped a 4-year-old from his mother. Marcus couldn't reconcile these versions. Maybe his father was both, capable of profound love and profound selfishness. Maybe the love didn't erase the crime any more than the crime erased the love. But his mother, Deborah Tinsley, deserved to know he was alive. Angela said it one night. "You have a mother who's been looking for you for 26 years. She deserves to know you're alive." In early September, Marcus contacted a lawyer named Ethan Pierce in Columbus. Pierce listened to everything, then said, "Let me reach out to Deborah on your behalf. I won't identify you by name. I'll just say I represent someone connected to her missing son. If she's willing, we can arrange a meeting." 2 days later, Pierce sent a letter. Deborah called his office the next morning. The first call. "She cried for 10 minutes, Pierce told Marcus afterward. "Then she said she understands you need time. She'll do whatever you need. She just wants to know you're okay." Over the next month, Pierce served as intermediary. Deborah wanted Marcus to know she'd kept all his baby things, celebrated every birthday, never remarried. Marcus sent messages back. He was okay, going to be a father soon, didn't blame her. In October, Deborah sent a package. Inside was a stuffed dog, old and worn. A note. "You called him Copper. You took him everywhere." Marcus held the dog and something unlocked. He remembered it. He remembered carrying it. He remembered a woman's voice singing to him. In early November, Marcus told Angela he was ready. Pierce arranged a meeting for November 18th in Columbus. Marcus drove there with Angela. When they arrived, Pierce walked them to a small conference room. Deborah was already there. She looked up when Marcus entered, and her face crumpled. She crossed the room and wrapped her arms around him. She smelled like lavender. "My baby," she whispered. Marcus just held her and let her cry. Part 2. The Weight of 26 Years. They sat for 3 hours. Pierce had ordered coffee, but no one touched it. Deborah couldn't stop looking at Marcus. She told him about May 6th, the ex parte order, asking the sheriff to wait, coming home to emptiness, the letter describing funeral arrangements, the years of searching. "I need you to know something," she said. "That order wasn't about keeping you from your father. 10 days, that's all. I never wanted to take you away permanently. I just needed space to figure things out safely. Marcus nodded slowly. He told me you were trying to cut him out of my life. That's not true. You deserved both parents. He took that choice away from both of us. She showed him photos on her phone. A baby with chubby cheeks, a toddler learning to walk. You were such a happy child. You loved animals. You wanted to be a veterinarian. Marcus stared at the photos. He didn't remember any of it. Do you remember me at all? Deborah asked. Marcus wanted to lie, to give her something. No, I'm sorry. She nodded, wiping her eyes. It's okay. I'm just glad you're alive. Angela reached over and squeezed Deborah's hand. He's had a good life. His father, Reuben, he loved Marcus. Deborah's face hardened, then softened. I know he did. That's what I can't reconcile. He loved you enough to steal you, but not enough to bring you home. I think he was broken, Marcus said. Something fractured. And instead of fixing it, he ran and spent the rest of his life convincing himself it was right. Does that make it okay? No, but it makes it human. They talked about Marcus's life, his education, his job, Angela, the baby. Deborah cried when he told her she'd be a grandmother. Toward the end, Deborah asked, "Are you going to contact the FBI?" Marcus looked at Angela. I don't know. He committed a crime, but he's also my father, the only father I've known, and he's 66 with health problems. Deborah was quiet. I spent 26 years wanting justice, but now, sitting here, I don't know what justice looks like. She took a breath. Whatever you decide, I'll support you. They agreed to meet again. Marcus promised to stay in touch. When they left, Deborah hugged him one more time. I missed you every single day. I'm sorry I didn't find you sooner. You found me when you were supposed to. The confrontation. Marcus didn't go home that night. The next day, he returned to Toledo and found Robert at the kitchen table, looking like he hadn't slept in weeks. You talked to her, Robert said. Yeah, and now I know the truth, the real truth. My version is the truth. She was going to take you from me. She wanted 10 days. You turned it into 26 years. I panicked. You wrote a letter saying you'd kill us both. Robert looked away. I wasn't thinking straight. I thought if I lost you, I'd lose everything. So you made sure she had nothing either. Robert's hands shook. I know what I did. Do you think I didn't wake up every morning wondering if today was the day you'd find out? You didn't have me to lose. You stole me. I raised you, Robert's voice rose. I was there for every scraped knee, every nightmare, everything. I was your father. You were my kidnapper. The word hung between them. Robert's face crumpled. Is that all I am to you now? I don't know what you are. I see the man who taught me baseball, but I also see the man who ripped me from my mother and let her think I was dead for 26 years. I don't know how to love you and hate you at the same time. Robert was crying. I'm sorry. God, Marcus, I'm so sorry. My name isn't Marcus, it's Reuben. You'll always be Marcus to me. And that's the problem. Silence stretched. Finally, Marcus stood. I'm going to the FBI. You'll be arrested. You'll go to prison. But I'm going to testify on your behalf. I'll tell them you weren't a monster, that you loved me, even if that love was selfish and wrong. Robert looked up. Will you visit me? I don't know. I need time to figure out who I am. I need to build a relationship with my mother. I need to be a father without carrying all this weight. I understand. Do you? You took my childhood. You took my mother. You took my identity. You made me into someone I'm not. Robert wiped his eyes. I never meant to hurt you. I know, but you did anyway. The federal investigation Marcus contacted Special Agent Lorraine Hughes on November 21st, 2022. She'd worked the case for a decade before it went cold. When her assistant said someone was calling about Reuben Blackwell, she nearly dropped her coffee. When Marcus walked in with Attorney Pierce 2 days later, Hughes had to steady herself. The age progression images had been close, but they hadn't captured the quiet intelligence in his eyes. Marcus told her everything: the DNA test, the documents, the meeting with Deborah, the confrontation. He told her where his father was, what name he'd been using. "You know this means your father will be arrested," Hughes said. "I know." "He could get 20 years. "I know, but he's 66. He's not healthy. 20 years is a life sentence." "Did he ever hurt you? Physically? Sexually?" "No, never. He was a good father, in most ways. Except for the kidnapping part." "Except for that." They arrested Robert Webb on November 27, 2022, the day before Thanksgiving. He didn't resist. He asked to call his son. Marcus answered in Angela's parents' kitchen. "They're here," Robert said, voice calm. "I just wanted to hear your voice one more time. I'm sorry." "Don't be. You did the right thing. I should have done it 26 years ago, so now you're doing it for both of us." "Dad, I love you, Marcus. Reuben. Whatever name you go by, I love you." The line went dead. The trial and sentencing. The federal government charged Reuben Blackwell Sr. with kidnapping and unlawful flight to avoid prosecution. The case attracted national attention. Cable news debated the ethics of parental abduction. Deborah gave one interview. "I'm grateful my son is alive, but what Reuben Sr. did was a crime. He stole 26 years from me. That's not something you forgive easily." Marcus gave one interview to a podcast about family abduction. "My father made a choice that destroyed multiple lives, but he also raised me with kindness most of the time. He wasn't a monster. He was a broken man who made a catastrophic decision. I can be angry about what he did and still love him. Those two things can coexist." The episode went viral. Marcus received hundreds of messages, some supportive, some critical, some from others who'd been abducted as children. In March 2024, facing overwhelming evidence, Reuben Sr. decided to plead guilty. He didn't want Marcus to testify against him. The plea hearing was April 18, 2024. Reuben Sr. stood before Judge Patricia Morrison and admitted everything. When asked if he had anything to say, he looked at Marcus, sitting between Deborah and Angela. "I want to apologize to my son, to Reuben Jr., for taking away his choice. I told myself I was protecting him, but I was protecting myself from loss. I want to apologize to Deborah. She didn't deserve that." His voice cracked. "I can't undo what I did. I can only accept the consequences." Judge Morrison scheduled sentencing for October 2024. Marcus visited his father once in June. They sat in a visiting room with a guard nearby. "How's Angela? The baby?" "Good. We found out it's a boy. We're naming him Christopher." Reuben Sr.'s face lit up. "That's wonderful. Will you tell him about me?" "Yeah, when he's old enough. I'll tell him about his grandfather. All of it. The good and the bad." "Will you tell him I loved you?" "Yeah, I'll tell him that too." When visiting hours ended, Reuben Sr. reached out his hand. Marcus shook it, then pulled his father into a brief hug. "I'm sorry," Reuben Sr. whispered. "I know." Marcus didn't visit again before sentencing. On October 15, 2024, Judge Morrison sentenced Reuben Blackwell Sr. to 12 years in federal prison. Less than prosecution requested, more than defense hoped for. "You robbed your son of his mother," Judge Morrison said. "You robbed his mother of her son. You robbed both of them of 26 years they can never get back. Your love for your child doesn't excuse what you did. It makes it worse, because you knew better." Reuben Sr. took the sentence without emotion. Marcus felt both relief and grief. 12 years meant his father would be 78 when released, if he lived that long. After the hearing, reporters swarmed them on the courthouse steps. Deborah said, "I don't know if there's justice in a case like this, but there's accountability, and that matters." Marcus said, "My father made a terrible choice. He's being held responsible. Beyond that, I don't know what else to say." They walked away together, Marcus, Deborah, and Angela. The space between life doesn't have neat endings. Marcus and Deborah met for lunch every few weeks. They were building something, but it wasn't exactly a mother-son relationship. How could it be? Marcus was 31. He didn't need a mother in the traditional sense. What he needed was connection to the life he'd been stolen from. "Do you ever regret finding me?" she asked once. "No, never. But I regret it took so long. I regret Dad took that time from both of us." "Do you still think of him as your dad?" "Yeah, I think I always will. That doesn't mean I forgive what he did, but he raised me. You can't erase that. I'm trying to make peace with that." Christopher was born December 3rd, 2024. Marcus called Deborah from the hospital. She drove up the next day to meet her grandson. She held the baby and cried, "He's beautiful." "He is, and he'll know who you are, I promise." Marcus also called the prison. Reuben Sr. congratulated him, asked about Angela, asked if everyone was healthy. He didn't ask if Marcus would bring Christopher to visit. He knew the answer. In February, on his 32nd birthday, Marcus visited his father in prison. First time since June. Reuben Sr. looked older, grayer, more tired. "Happy birthday." "Thanks. Deborah and Angela's family threw me a party." Reuben Sr. smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm glad you have that now. I should have always had it." "I know." They talked about nothing important. Christopher's sleeping habits, Marcus's students, prison food. As visiting hours wound down, Marcus said something he'd held in for months. "I'm going to keep visiting. Not every week, maybe not every month, but I'll come. Because you're still my father, and I still love you, even though I hate what you did. Those two things are both true, and I'm done trying to choose between them." Reuben Sr.'s eyes filled. "Thank you. But I need you to understand something. I have two parents now. I'm building a relationship with my mother. And that doesn't take anything away from you because there was never anything to take. You stole me. I'm reclaiming it now, and you don't get a vote. I understand. And I'm glad you found her. I'm glad you're not alone." When Marcus left that day, he felt lighter. Not free. He'd never be free of this story. But lighter. The truth we carry. In spring 2025, a Washington Post journalist reached out. She was writing about parental abduction. Marcus agreed with conditions. He wanted honesty about the complexity. The article ran in June under the headline, "The Man with Two Fathers: How One Son Navigated Love and Betrayal." It was thoughtful and nuanced. The story went viral. It prompted 3 other adults who'd been abducted as children to come forward. In September 2025, Marcus received a letter from his father. Short, shaky handwriting. "Dear Reuben," it began. Not Marcus. Reuben. "I know I don't have the right to ask for forgiveness, but I want you to know that every good thing I did, every time I helped you, showed up for you, told you I loved you, that was real. I was a criminal, but I was also your father. Both things are true. I hope you teach Christopher to be better than me, to make better choices, to love people without trying to own them. I'm proud of you. Love, Dad." Marcus folded the letter and put it in a box with all the other documents. Someday, when Christopher was old enough, Marcus would show him. He'd tell him about the grandfather who loved him enough to commit a crime, and the grandmother who loved him enough never to give up. He'd tell him the truth, all of it, because secrets had destroyed one generation, and Marcus wouldn't let them destroy another. On a warm October afternoon, Marcus and Deborah stood together outside the courthouse, where Reuben Sr. had been sentenced a year earlier. They'd just finished meeting with a support group for families affected by parental abduction. Marcus had agreed to speak, to share his story, to help others navigate the impossible terrain of loving someone who'd committed a terrible crime. As they walked to their cars, Deborah said, "Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if he hadn't taken you?" "All the time, but I try not to live there. I can't change what happened. I can only decide what I do with it now." "That's wise. I learned it in therapy." They both laughed, and it felt like healing. Back in Toledo, Angela texted a photo of Christopher sleeping, the baby who would grow up knowing both his grandmothers, the one who'd searched for decades and the one who existed only in stories, the baby who would carry the weight of this history but wouldn't be crushed by it. Marcus drove back with Deborah in the passenger seat. They talked about ordinary things, the weather, Angela's work schedule, parent-teacher conferences. The conversation was easy, comfortable, normal. That's what they were building. Not perfect, not uncomplicated, but normal. And for now, that was enough. 2 years later, in fall 2027, Marcus received word that his father had suffered a massive heart attack in prison. He was transferred to the medical facility at FMC Butner in North Carolina. Marcus flew there with Angela and 2-year-old Christopher. They were allowed into the medical ward for 30 minutes. Reuben Sr. was hooked to machines, face drawn and pale. But when he saw Marcus and Christopher, his eyes lit up. "Is that him?" "Yeah, this is Christopher." Marcus lifted his son. Christopher was more interested in the machines than the old man. "He's beautiful. He has your eyes, Deborah's eyes. He does." Before they left, Reuben Sr. said, "I'm sorry I won't get to see him grow up. Tell him about me, the good parts." "I will. And tell Deborah I'm sorry. I know it doesn't mean anything now, but tell her anyway." "I'll tell her." Reuben Sr. died 3 days later. He was 69 years old. He'd served just under 3 years of his sentence. The funeral was small: Marcus, Angela, a few people from the prison chaplaincy program. Deborah sent flowers but didn't attend. Marcus didn't blame her. They scattered Reuben Sr.'s ashes in Lake Erie. "Somewhere near water," he'd written almost 30 years ago. Marcus stood on the shore with Christopher in his arms and watched the ashes disappear. "Bye, Grandpa," Christopher said, waving. "Bye, Dad," Marcus whispered. That night, Marcus called Deborah. "He's gone." "I heard. Are you okay?" "I don't know. I think so." "However you feel is okay. You're allowed to grieve him." "Even after everything?" "Especially after everything. That's what makes it hard." Before hanging up, Deborah said, "You know what I realized? He didn't win. He tried to take you from me permanently, and he failed. You found me. You chose to know me. He tried to erase me, and he couldn't." "No," Marcus agreed. "That's not nothing." In the months that followed, Marcus continued building his life, teaching, raising his son, visiting Deborah regularly, writing in his journal. He planted a tree in his backyard in memory of his father, not to glorify him, but to acknowledge that complicated people deserve complicated memorials. On Christopher's 3rd birthday, Marcus showed his son the box. The photos, documents, letters. Christopher was too young to understand, but Marcus wanted to start early. "This is where you come from. This is your history. It's complicated, and when you're older, I'll explain more. But you come from people who loved deeply, even when they loved badly, and it's our job to do better." Christopher nodded solemnly, then asked if he could have cake. Marcus laughed. "Yeah, buddy, you can have cake." He looked at the photos scattered on the floor, images of a little boy named Reuben who'd become Marcus, who was now trying to be both. And he realized he'd finally answered the question that had haunted him since August 2022 when he found the envelope. How do you reconcile loving someone who hurt you? You don't. You can't. You just learn to carry both truths, the love and the harm, and you teach your children that people are complicated, that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and that the hardest stories to tell are often the most important. You tell them the truth, all of it, and you hope that truth sets them free in ways you never were. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this case. Leave a comment below and tell us, if you were in Marcus's position, would you have contacted the FBI? Or would you have kept your father's secret? There's no right answer, but your perspective matters.